Hi there, I am Simon Marshall. Today's session with the BD Roundtable is going to focus on CRM behaviors. We're going to focus on data. We're going to focus on people and systems and how these things work together. We're going to focus on social media as well. That sounds like a lot of things to focus on, but as per usual with Alexander Lowe, who's joining us today, we can cover a lot in 1 hour. I guarantee it as well. Alex, would you like to give everyone an introduction? Introduce yourself quickly.
Absolutely. Welcome, everybody, and thank you, Simon, for having me here. So, for those of you that don't know me, I recognise a few names on the screen. My name's Alex, and my background is sales and marketing, 15 plus years, recruitment, then into PwC, then into Berman Leighton Paisner as was, where I set up their key client program. And also towards the end of my time there was introduced the concept of social selling. So how do we use social in terms of BD, then moved into commercial real estate. So with James Lang LaSalle, where I led the first ever global social selling program globally in the commercial real estate sector, apparently according to LinkedIn, again, using LinkedIn and LinkedIn Sales Navigator to start business conversations, to generate BD conversations. Then became an independent consultant for 4.5 years, consulting back into professional service organizations, helping them understand the new world order of socials, CRM, data, and so on. And then most recently, I have joined an AI MarTech startup called Lately, which leverages the power of AI to create social media posts for you. That is me, Simon.
Good. Okay, I knew we'd cover a lot of ground in in 60 seconds as well. So that's a great start. Listen, I thought let's start out with quite an easy one, I suppose. Ideally, how would a CRM program work if you're at a law firm or a professional services firm? What can you give me some ideas, just some hints? It doesn't have to be, comprehensive, just some ideas from you as to what it would look like if it's working.
I think there needs to be some structure in place already, i.e. you're running via industry, practice group, you've identified the top 20, top 30 accounts that you want to work with or you want to maintain and develop from. Because fundamentally, if you think about what CRM is, it's client relationship management tool. It's a tool purely to manage your relationships on a day-to-day basis, and it's kind of similar to what we were talking about before we went live with Will around project management. It enables you to project manage, if you will, the relationship you have between yourself and your existing customers, just to record what's happening. Phone call, meeting, pitch, value of pitch opportunity, win-loss, and then delivery of that. And if I think back to my recruitment days, way back when at Michael Page, you lived and died by the CRM system. And if you didn't go in the CRM system, you didn't get paid commission. If people weren't going into CRM to understand the rules of engagement with key clients, so don't do this, do this, go and speak to the account lead first before you want to pitch this organization, because there's certain processes that need to happen before this happens, then people were dragged over hot coals. And that's what I always get frustrated when people say, oh, the CRM system is crap, because CRM systems are just dumb, inanimate pieces of technology that are powered by the human beings. And typically, if you don't understand what is the outcome we are trying to generate by having this platform, this tool in place, and why am I being asked to input this data, then we just feel it's just a management tool to drive KPIs, which we never really understand the outcomes of. And if I look at my experience being, within Big Four consulting firm, within a law firm, typically CRM systems are just seen as either email marketing databases to invite people to events, or just have lists and lists of contacts, and that's it. They don't really understand the whole capability of what can be done in terms of reporting to help then have better conversations with your clients, so you're not tripping over each other. But there has to be a kind of a direction of travel that you want to be going in with your client base in order to then have a system in place to support that.
Before we dig too far into the kind of things that aren't working, I wonder if there were any things that you'd highlight that you've seen that really do work. The systems, I mean, you've been at JLL and you've done a social selling program. So, I mean, clearly, there's been some successes in places where, likewise with Big Four. What are firms getting predominantly? What are firms getting right at the moment?
I think it's keeping it simple to start with, especially if you're thinking about a CRM refresh. You're moving from an old legacy system to a new system. You might be going to a new system all together. It's like it's keeping things simple, i.e. let the tool do what the tool is meant to do. So fundamentally, try and get as much out of the box capability and leave out of the box capability as you can, because when you start to try and tinker, and when you try and be all things to all people, hi Anand, that's when things start to get complicated. And when systems start becoming complicated, people just don't use it. And then it's around thinking about the outcomes. What am I trying to do and why? And then work backwards through your processes to understand what does your current process have, what are your current processes in place that can be augmented or can be supported by the new CRM system, if you will, and or you may need to change some of your legacy processes to fit the new way of managing and reporting. And then it's learning, testing, iterating from that. Then it's starting to build out. The key thing, though, I think of the success story that PwC has had with Salesforce. I wasn't part of that, but I've read the case studies, know people work there. It's also leadership. So from the absolute top, managing partner, CEO, what have you, is leading from the front on this and telling everybody that if this is what we're going to be doing, and you're either kind of on board or not, and if you're not on board, we might have a problem further down the line in terms of your future tenure at this organization. If you don't have that buy-in from the very top and the leadership from the top in terms of actually doing the do as it were, then why would you expect any of the subordinates or the more junior members of staff to do it if leadership isn't doing it? And that's the same whether you want to engage in social media, in terms of reporting, all this kind of stuff. We all know the minute that somebody starts shouting from the rooftops that, oh, I'm not going to do this, then you potentially lost an entire practice group, because if their fearless leader isn't doing it, then they're sitting there, well, if they're not doing it and they're a senior person and I want to get to that position, then why the hell should I do it? So leadership, clear leadership from the top, and then executing upon that. Communication. So communication to your staff members as to why this is being done, involving them. How often have we all been on the receiving end of a CRM project where the person that's actually using the tool or the platform was never consulted in terms of, well, how might you want to use it? Don't let IT lead it. The business needs to lead it, supported by obviously the IT function. And back to that legacy piece. Sometimes you may have to kind of break, but we've always done it this way, kind of syndrome, going, yeah, I know we've done it always in that way, but there's now a new, better, more effective way to do things. And here's the outcomes or the outputs that will generate. But in order for that to happen, you're going to have to do things a little differently.
I wonder whether some of the issues that you've highlighted there can be traced back to, not having stuck to that mantra of people, process, and technology. And in a way, we've the things that I've seen where it doesn't work as well is that people aren't ready for a system. Like, we buy a system and then try and reverse engineer it so it doesn't work for everyone. But actually, if your people aren't ready to take on whatever's coming, as you said, end users have got to help scope it, and they've got to understand it, and they've got to understand what problems you're trying to solve with it as well. Any thoughts on that? Do you see it as something that works the wrong way around at the moment?
I think absolutely. Again, it's not unique to legal. The legal industry is unique in terms of the behaviors and the way that clients are managed. So it's my client rather than the client of the firm. I don't want to share my relationships with anybody else in the firm because it's my client. And then we move into, there's no point even covering it in this session, but then how lawyers are KPI'd, how they're driven to achieve those outcomes. But then if I think back to my days at my BLP days, and this is what, 10 years ago now with Interaction, it was things like running basic meeting reports. So this then starts to come to kind of integration and workflow. If I think back then, all the individual had to do was tick a box in Outlook when they were booking the meeting in their calendar to record that meeting into Interaction. I could then run forward-looking meeting reports for the next 2 weeks or 4 weeks, which would be shared around every Monday morning with, hey, these are all the meetings we've got coming up with, say, clients. Who should buddy up? Who else is meeting these? Maybe you should go together rather than tripping up over each other or having back-to-back meetings. And what that started to do was drive better kind of cross relationships and hunting as a pack, if we're going to use that. But again, what was interesting is then the lead partner on that really liked that report because it kind of helped him understand who was doing BD and who was not doing BD at a partner level. Now, I remember having some partners really tearing a strip off me going, Alex, you've got to stop sending this around because I'm showing 0 meetings, but I've got meetings. And I'm like, well, then something's not happening. All you have to do is tick a box when you're creating that meeting in Outlook. There's nothing different. Either you or your EA or your PA has got to do it. I then had some conversations with PAs and EAs going, that's not my job, Alex. And I had to say, with the greatest respect in the world, it is. And I'm going to continue sending these reports. So we've got a choice here. You can continue shouting at me, but Matthew is my paymaster in terms of who I report to and what I'm doing here. He wants the reports, so he's going to get the reports. And fundamentally, over time, with a bit of stick, guess what? The partners that weren't playing ball started to realize that I wasn't going to shift. And actually, these meeting reports were quite useful because we were starting to get at, using data, albeit very basic data, just of who's meeting who, to have just better client conversations.
I remember CMS, so it would have been 04, around there. We had a series of very highly educated and highly proficient kind of PAs and VAs and whatever as well, EAs. And you were given a pay rise if you'd go and do the interaction training, you come out the other end of it and do it properly as well. And a certain tranche of people would do it. And then instead of offering them hard cash, you used to offer them chocolate to come up to the training sessions instead, and the attendance rates went through the roof. Okay, because people don't necessarily go after the big kahuna. They want the small and regular awards for coming along and updating and teasing their knowledge out, and it works perfectly well as well. I think you're right though, that's where this is what I mean though about the nature of the people element of it. Like if you knew what your role is in relation to that project, then you're more likely to understand if I don't do this thing, then it has knock-on implications for things that happen over there as well.
Absolutely, but what that highlighted was two things to me: was a lack of understanding of what the system could do.
Yeah.
In terms of reporting out outputs, if you will. So me going to Matthew at the time and a few other partners going, if I could do this for you, would that be helpful? Yes, that would be helpful, Alex. I didn't know we could do that. Right. In order for that to happen, this has to happen here. It's a simple, just tick the box when you're putting meetings into Outlook that are client related or part of the top 30 or the key client program. We can then run these reports so that we can just see what's going on. This isn't I'm trying to stop you from having client meetings. This isn't us being sneaky trying to steal your clients. It's just trying to make a better experience for clients so that you're not all, someone has a meeting with them on the Monday, then the next day someone else from BLP goes meeting on the Tuesday, and the GC or the managing director of the bank, whoever, is going, why didn't you just bring Bob, Sally, Jane along to the meeting yesterday? That's why are we doing this? This is just not good for me in terms of that experience. And it was just a very, very simple thing, but it was the lack of understanding of what the system, what the art of the possible was, because it was, here's a CRM system, it's just to manage contacts and then send out marketing emails.
And is your experience, before we move on to some talk about data a bit more, before we talk about the social media influence side of things, is your experience that CRM within professional services is getting better? And I'm not just talking about the systems, but actually the behaviours, as it were, around it. Are they getting better, or are we still just where we were previously?
It feels like, to be honest, that if I speak to some of my former peers who are still in role, as it were, that things don't really seem to have moved on from when I was doing this, way back when. What I am seeing, though, is because we're coming to kind of the life cycle of some CRM contracts that are in place with some brands out there, that is kind of forcing the agenda for organizations to start thinking about, well, what does the next iteration of this look like? And of course, we know what's happened over the last 15 months or so in terms of the importance of clean data, the importance of understanding relationships in a virtual world. But if I look at it in terms of what I'm seeing in the SaaS tech space, they've almost gone too far in terms of there's too much technology layered on top, that again, the sales reps in those organizations are kind of spending more time inputting data than they are actually selling, because there's too much stuff. So we kind of need to find the balance. I think the interesting for me, though, is where we're going to start to see AI come into all of this, moving across, and again, that's across all industries, to free up lawyers' time to do what they should be doing, which are either executing or generating business. Then the BD and marketing teams are getting better reporting, better activity, better to then make better, more informed decisions. And that's when you look at the behemoths like Salesforce and Microsoft, who've got the computing power, the cloud power to start to generate that. I think it's really interesting times ahead of us on that.
There's a worry, I think, on behalf of law firms, other professional services firms as well, around some of those AI tools, given the nature of and the confidential nature of a lot of their work as well, that they're worried about having a kind of organizational level kind of view as to what they're doing on the CRM side of things is a concern for them as well. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's always an interesting debate about what goes in the cloud and what doesn't go in the cloud. And I hear anecdotal stories that sometimes it's the cloud providers themselves that are telling law firms they don't want their data in the cloud. I think there has to be a bit of give and take in this. So sometimes it's, rather than just having default, we're not doing it, because that's what we've said for the last 10 years, is just start to think about, back to that understanding what the art of the possible is, because to be able to benefit from a lot of all of this, your data does need to be in the cloud. You do need to be able to have those, to ingest data so that these AI tools can work. But I do recognize that in some situations that stuff has to be locked down. It has to be on-prem in a highly secure environment. But I would suggest most clients' data, if we think what a CRM system is at a bare basic levels, is email, phone number, and then just activity. So what's happening in terms of activity with that, in terms of phone calls, meetings, marketing activity around events being marketed to, not exactly confidential per se, in terms of actual legal documentation of what's happening, in terms of actual matters that are being worked on. Okay, I recognize there are going to be situations where they do need to be in a more secure environment. But I think from a CRM perspective, in its own right, the organization is almost going to be forced to move to the cloud, because a lot of the on-prem stuff isn't being supported anyway.
No. On people and data, I just want to put those two things together for a minute as well. I mean, clearly what I do for a living is analyze lots of data out there in the world and see what it means for law firms. My sense is that there's just a huge skills gap at the moment. Like, people don't even know what questions they can ask, or what questions they can ask other people to ask in relation to the data. Is that a fair observation? Or
yeah, I think it is. I think there's a skills gap. I'm not suggesting that that can't be filled by the people that are already in in role, but then that comes back to, and each firm is unique. If you were to ask 100 lawyers what does BD do, I'd guarantee you get 100 different answers, because it will be dependent on what their expectation of the BD support is in that particular guise.
Yeah,
I think what's interesting is that there's articles are being authored on this back in 2017. It's around do you need a data scientist in your marketing team? There's a tweet from a lady who was at LinkedIn. She's now at Cisco, saying that any marketing exec who goes into data-driven exec meetings and starts with the words "I think" may well be asked to leave. Now, the interesting thing is dare I say it, that at the very, very top, you have individuals who maybe just aren't interested in learning the new world order because they've only got so long left on the clock, and why would they? Or maybe they're fearful of admitting that they don't understand what the new world order is and what the art of the possible is. And I'm not suggesting that you need to go to the extremes in terms of what we're seeing in the world of SaaS tech. But I do believe that you need to understand the art of the possible in the world of kind of CRM data, social media data, supporting AI tools on top of that, and then work backwards. What I always do with my clients is take them to the absolute extreme, almost to the point that they get terrified, and then they go, that's too far. But by the time they kind of come back a bit, they've actually taken 2 or 3 steps forward without necessarily realizing it.
Yeah. I think there's a lot to come this year. I mean, I've predicted that, that some regular training for your teams about those things, and I saw Martin Bragg said over the weekend that it's a brilliant phrase. What was it? An assumption was just a posh guess, and I kind of like that. I love that phrase, right? And the idea that I think that we as marketers, we have to work, as you said earlier, from art and science. We need better data, and then still to make really gut informed, appropriate marketing decisions. It's still a bet. Fundamentally, are we going to bet on this or this client? But I think that we narrow the range and improve our odds by using better data.
Absolutely. And I think that that's then where there is a lack of maturity in professional services compared to other industries is that ingestion of third-party data.
Yeah.
So I'm not talking things like if you've got Sales Navigator and you're bringing in LinkedIn data into your CRM environment. I'm talking about using things like ZoomInfo, RelSci, which are these third-party data platforms which give you much deeper insight in terms of the who, the what, the why, and the how. I do recognise that obviously Europe has its GDPR complications around that. The US market is very different, but that's where there is a lack of maturity on that side of things in professional services, because they still rely on their own data sets. And that's why technology platforms such as IntraHive are absolutely brilliant, because at least you've got some form of automation to start to keep CRM data clean. Because we know the minute a piece of information goes into CRM, it's already out of date. It's already out of date.
All data is just historic, right? All
exactly.
Data.
And that's where it's then looking at tools such as IntraHive to help you manage that data, so at least it's clean. But of course, that data this is the here and now. It's a brilliant tool in terms of mapping the email relationships of who's emailing who, what are the cadences in terms of those response rates to start to score those types of relationships. But then you start to layer that with things like your social media data around your relationships that are outside of the day-to-day. So, Simon, you could be the chief executive of an organization, but you're my golfing buddy, and I don't see it as a business relationship, so I'd never email you on our internal system. So that relationship's never going to be picked up by something like an IntraHive, because we just never email that way. But then I'm connected to you on social. So somebody then starts to map both the social data against your internal data. So, oh my goodness, Alex, you're connected to Simon. And then it's taking that one step further. But we come full circle back to the behaviors of people. Your point, people, process, technology in that order. So it's like in anything in life, it's not easy, but I do believe that if firms are now considering that they're in a CRM refresh or they're in CRM review, I would absolutely start looking at kind of the third-party data to support what you're already doing in the day-to-day, just to help you make better, more informed decisions about who you should be talking to about what, and whether you're going to go this route. This then starts to thing in things like your marketing data. So your marketing data to support with your CRM data. And this is where, if people on the call aren't doing so, follow a gentleman called Seth Mars from Forrester, MARRS. Because what Forrester are now talking about, and this subject, is what they call dynamic guided selling. So it's how B2B sales across all industry now needs to start taking a leaf out of e-commerce. So use multiple data points. Your sales teams, your marketing teams, your BD teams, your marketing teams now need to start talking to each other. I would say partners, BD and marketing now need to start talking to each other to start to make better decisions around what our marketing content should be, so that, and then what our messaging should be, our sales messaging should be. So then you're getting to the point where you move into the world of intent, and there's some crazy stuff happening in the world of intent data around, again, those third-party data sources, so that you're actually starting to get ahead of the conversation. You're going where the customer or the client or the prospect's going to be, not where they have come from. That requires a different thinking process, and that does require a different kind of skill set. Now, you and I geek out over data day in and day out, and it's not for everyone, but maybe then we need to start thinking about the construct of BD and marketing teams, that you need to have the equivalent of me and you within that organization, and that's what they do, supported by someone who's a brilliant content strategist, marketing strategist, and so on.
I think, a few things on that. One, I think that you should probably start out with that outcome intent, whatever that objective is on the right-hand side of the function. If it's adding X million or adding X clients, or, revitalizing the relationship with certain clients, or getting a key account program to achieve, 10% growth between it, whatever it might be, I think that everything should flow backwards from the balance sheet through all of the activities. And I think that, for a lot of years there in the legal sector, I think it's fair to say it's flowed, where it has flowed, it's probably flowed left to right from comms and marketing. And then we're going to get to this, there's a disjoint in the middle, and then there's BD and CRM that happens over the other side. But I think that data and social media and CRM are things that they're the golden thread that take us across all of those different points of the journey, from comms and marketing and BD and sales. Frankly, let's call it what it is, right, to the other side of things. And I think the time has come to say we need joined up plans for each of those things we're doing, and even strangely that your joined up plans need to be joined up. So that there might be some seasonality to it. You might say, let's do this for a season, and if you're working as you do now more on the tech side of things, quite often you might do a geographical play for a bit. You might do a sector play for a bit, whatever it might be. And I think that if firms can start to think about that in terms of that a bit, in terms of how they're playing out their different threads of sales and marketing efforts. So here's my big contention. It'll be interesting to see if you agree with it. I think there's a schism regularly between marketing and BD teams. I don't think it's overstating it to say it's a schism, right? There's just a breakdown there. And I think I've been thought about this for a long time, and I might have said it on previous calls as well, but I think it's driven by one thing. The leader of the department will either be formally a marcoms person or a BD and salesperson, but they're very unlikely to have been both, right? And that's my experience, is they won't have done both sides. And so I wonder, on the people side, well, one, do you agree with me? Do you think there's anything in what I'm saying?
Yes. Yeah, it's the same. It's the same across all industries. Again, this is not unique to legals, and there's research out there which says this, and there's the research out there which is now saying that your sales teams and your marketing teams, you've now got to start working together. So in legal, your sales team is BD and the lawyers.
Yeah, and I think that but I think on the people side of things, if there's anything to happen in 2021, and I'd encourage all CMOs, whichever side you're from, please go and invest some time on the other side externally. I mean, with you, Alex, or with other people out there as well, are always willing to and interested to talk about their things and their preferences and how they see the world working. They'll shortcut, I think, a lot of time, but within their departments, I think, with your help, with my help, using CRM, using data, using social media, you can actually tie those two halves together. So the first step is to understand what's on the other side of the fence and what's really needed. And I think we need to see a bit more of that from firms. And then the other side, as I say, is to join it up and make sure that there are common objectives and campaigns that work across the teams.
Absolutely, but I think it also, the challenge with professional services is, again, it's how revenue is attributed.
Yeah.
Let alone if it's profitable. If it's profitable, the revenue is a whole different, ball game around that. But it comes back to kind of the KPIs of how people are revenue driven. Of course, the majority of BD people don't really carry a number, or if they do carry a number, it's kind of, there's so many kind of moving parts around that. And CMOs don't really carry a number, because the law firm it's a tricky one. Unlike in SaaS tech sales, it's pretty straightforward in terms of the way the product is, the pricing is the pricing. As you obviously scale in the enterprise, it gets slightly different, but it's kind of input output. The more people you talk to, the more sales conversations you have, you can then start to kind of forecast more easily. In professional services, sometimes these deals are it's 18 months, it's a 3-year play to get some of the big stuff in. So it's not as kind of cut and dry as that. But yes, I would agree with you. Do you need a chief revenue officer, so a CRO, to sit alongside the CMO to drive more of those kind of that sales behavior? That then comes full circle though. If you've got better reporting, and this is what PwC was saying now, where they got Salesforce across the piece. For the first time, they now globally can see. I think it's not the first time now. I think they've had it for the best part of 12 months now, if not longer. But they're able to report globally on their clients in terms of pipeline management, revenue management, all that kind of stuff. But if you're not recording your pitches, if you're not recording the pitch value in that, if BD isn't then taking ownership in terms of weighted pitch. And I remember the arguments back at my BLP days, where someone would put in we've been invited to a panel, a panel tender. This is worth $1 million, and I say no, it's not. It's worth 0. No, it's worth $1 million. I said it's not. It's worth 0. All we're doing is winning the right to bid for work. Yeah. We could be on that panel and get zip. So you can't put $1 million against that panel bid, because it's just a panel bid. But again, the reason that the lawyer was doing that is because they wanted to have $1 million against their name for reporting upstream, and it wasn't really ever being challenged. So again, it's if I think back to my JLL days, when they did a very, very successful campaign for now with my me being a salesperson, thinking with my marketing hat on, I think it's 300,000 views or 500,000 views on this workplace video, and everyone was really excited about it in terms of it's brilliant, most viewed video in corporate real estate, awesome, congratulations. And me being me, the first thing I said, well, where are the leads? If we're supposed to be demonstrating this new product and this service we have, where's the inbound that these 500,000 views have created? And marketing went to me, oh, that's not what we're being tasked to do. It's just brand awareness. I'm like, okay, I get that that's important. But for me, in terms of the sales engine, that's a complete waste of time, to be honest. So it's that, to your point, it's need to talk to each other. Yes, brand visibility, of course, is critical, but why are we doing this? If it's just for vanity, if it's just for show, then in this day and age, especially in this virtual world we find ourselves in, that we've got to start thinking a little more strategically and tactically around this, I think.
If there's one thing that's limitless within, law firms and other professional services, it's the desire to do, some marketing and BD stuff. And the only way, you're always going to have an over-demand supply of headcount. And one of the ways to manage that, I found, when I was working predominantly on the PR side, so a few years ago, would be to say, if the PR is not going to lead to revenue at the other end, if it's not joined up to the sales effort over there, then let's not do it.
Yeah,
and it changes. I know it's quite brave for it, because PR is normally driven purely by coverage, and that's fine. I can understand why you do that. But I'd say, well, look, if it's not driven by whatever the managing partner wants, or revenue, predominantly, then we haven't got the bandwidth to do things that aren't going to go anywhere as well. And I don't want any hit and hope things.
Right.
I think that's true of marketing. I think they can say the same in events. And what's happening next, right? Have you got a follow-up plan? If you haven't got a follow-up plan, then it's not. Where's it going? If it's not going anywhere, then let's not do it.
100%. We all see it, and again, this isn't bashing legal. It's not unique to the legal sector. But if you're going to create an event, what's the content that's come out of that event? How are you then leveraging that content, that conversation, to then keep the conversation going on online? Who's responsible for following up in terms of the event? What's that going to look like? How is that then being recorded to then make sure things are happening and then reported on if it's not happening, and so on? And I was speaking to a law firm who should remain nameless, but the emails they sent out over the last 12 months, the volumes, in the millions, is utterly insane. And yet the open rates are zip. So I'm not saying don't do email marketing. I fully admit, I know historically I've said don't do email marketing. It absolutely has its place, but start to use the data. Look at the unsubscribes, look at the open rates, look at the people that aren't doing anything, because you're just annoying them, and you're not the only law firm on the planet who is marketing to these people. So start to time your cadence by the cadence of other firms. It's just noise. It's things like, how sophisticated is your current website in terms of your domain sign, website visits, downloads. If you're starting to stitch up the social media aspect of things, so I posted this article on LinkedIn, this generated X number of views by these companies. If I have premium, I can now see who's looked at my profile. That's interesting. If you have Sales Navigator, you can get even more insight. How's that tie into what's happening with our website? Has anybody from that company visited the website? Have they downloaded everything? Have they signed up to an event? Start to signal something that might then be happening. Then if you start to layer the dreaded AI on all of this, I think from a CRM perspective, so I think it's Einstein in Salesforce, it's Microsoft Sales Insights on Dynamics, where these tools start to get to, is can start to predict when client relationships are tailing off.
Yeah.
Hey, nobody from your organization has contacted this organization in the last 6 weeks. Red flag. Maybe someone should do something. Now, it could be that they have been contacted, but behaviorally no one's recording this in the CRM system, but at least that's flagging. Or actually no one has contacted that organization, because what professional service firms are very guilty of is they're just chasing the deal. And if there's no deal to be had, then they don't. And when I was back in my PwC days, this is what sometimes we were told. You're brilliant when there's something to have, but then we don't hear from you for like 12 months. And then you only hear from me when there's something to have. Whereas Deloitte are brilliant at keeping in contact with us, even when there's no potential paid work. So why do you think Deloitte are getting it over PwC? Or why do you think A&O are getting it over CCs in terms of, because they're maintaining that relationship, which is our bit of the CRM, if you will, to help you maintain those conversations moving forward.
And I think that needs to be part of the changing conversation internally about how that recognition that takes place, because partners doing that kind of work that isn't necessarily going to play off in a 3-month period, but might pay off in a 12-month period, need to be able to record the activity in a way that looks like, look, this is part of the funnel. This is where we are with this one, right? They are, a lapsed client, as it were, but we are doing our best to remain front of mind so that we're on the short list when it comes to a bid later. It's perfectly valid work. It's just that it shouldn't be treated the same as, we're on this client's panel, and if we don't win this bid, then all of the effort we've done for the last 3 years is a bit wasted, as it were. And I think there needs to be nuance in how we record those behaviors and the understanding of the multipliers of what we need to do in terms of the volumes of each of those things as well. What's possible for a partner to do, how many relationships they should be looking after, not dozens and dozens, but actually 100 broadly, 12 here, and 2 on a day-to-day basis. I don't know, it seems to me
that comes back to then I was saying at the very beginning, you need to have some kind of direction of travel and structure in place rather than just spray and pray, because spray and pray isn't going to help anybody. And that's now where things like the data can start to help you make more informed decisions around this. But also, elephants in the room, BD should be client facing. That's why I joined BLP way back when, working for Dominic de Mariveles, because he's one of the very few firms that I interviewed with where they said, Yeah, I want you in front of the clients, because to your point, Simon, absolutely right. You shouldn't necessarily have lawyers having kind of pointless meetings, whereas BD can go out and pick up the. It doesn't have to be face to face. It could be a telephone conversation. It could be just an update on something that's happened. It could be dropping a like on a social post. It could be retweeting something on Twitter at an individual level. Empower the BD team, business development, kind of clues in the title, right, to take some ownership of that and own some client relationships in a face-to-face world. And that's what the Big Four were very good at, and have been very good at, is that BD in Big Four typically, and I'm going to say it, they've all come from, the majority of them have come from a sales background. That's why back in the day when I joined PwC, like 16 of us left Michael Page, hardcore Glengarry, Glen Ross, cold calling sales environment, to go into that environment. And we were told, set meetings for partners, go to client, get meetings for partners, bring them in when it's when it's appropriate. You're now starting to see in some cases, BD making equity partner in Big Four and manage those big commercial relationships that are worth multiples of millions of dollars, which is taking more of the model of kind of the SaaS tech world of, you are the BD person owns the revenue number, and then the technical salespeople are brought in at the appropriate time. So the equivalent would be the lawyer. So the lawyer comes in as the technical salesperson at the appropriate time, and the BD person is kind of the conductor, orchestrating all these moving parts within these accounts. And we're not really seeing that in the legal space yet. But that's going to take a brave fundamental shift, in my view, within the sector for a firm to do that. Because of everything, the legacy, the history, the challenges that are just the nature of the beast of law firms.
Yeah. Okay, listen, thank you so much for that. What I'm going to do is, for those of you who've been watching on catch up, it ends here. And if you want to join us for the next part, the best thing to do is to join the BD Roundtable's kind of group of individuals. It's free to sign up. And the details are on the post on LinkedIn as well, because the rest of the people on the call now are going to ask Alex loads of questions about what he's been talking about today. So Alex, listen, thank you from my heart. You're always a brilliant speaker. We've covered a lot of ground today, but I do think it's a good idea for the remaining people on the call. They get to ask all these questions. So I'm going to switch off this video. If you want to say goodbye to the YouTubers.
Bye-bye, YouTubers.
Does anybody have a question they'd like to ask Alex in terms of the topics we've been covering? Data, CRM systems, people, anything to do with social media. He's a broad church. You can ask him anything you like, really. You might want to raise a hand first, so probably the easiest way, and I can unmute people that way.
Or if anybody wants to share their experiences, what they're seeing, in terms of what any learnings you've had, things you've done and you felt worked well. Or everyone's having lunch. I won't be offended.
What my sense is at the moment that things have been further complicated, Alex, by the use of social media over the last few years. Right? So what was already, challenging, and we had lots of people doing loads of different marketing and comms activities, has actually been made even more complex by different people going out individually to market through social media, but without necessarily a fundamental understanding of the difference between comms, marketing, BD, CRM. Is that a fair observation?
I think the observation I'd make is that until everything went tits up, the perception of social media in legal primarily was this as the marketing's domain, is kind of big messaging. It's just not relevant for me, the individual. And again, the firm will remain nameless. And this was ages ago when I was speaking to a BD person about Sales Navigator, and their response was, "That's not me. That's social media. I don't do that." I'm like, okay, good luck with that. So what's been fascinating is the fact that if we focus on LinkedIn, because that primarily is the safe place for most lawyers, is this dawn of realization that actually social media is not your kids messing around on Instagram or TikTok. It's not just the domain of the Marcons team pushing out messages. This whole, can you, and I do feel for the digital teams, the marketing teams, the lawyers going, can you get my really uninteresting post out on the company page? I want my thing on the company page, which no one's going to care about anyway. And this understanding that actually they should be taking some ownership and doing it themselves from their personal pages. And then, what I saw over the last 15 months or so was this, I had no idea you could do this. This is actually quite easy. This isn't time consuming. I can now understand outcomes or outputs. I now understand, but if I do this, this, and that can potentially generate that, which then can mean either maintaining relationships with my clients or getting me new clients in terms of origination. And in-person conferences aren't going to be happening anytime soon. We'll see with the challenge in the UK with the Indian variant at the moment, what that looks like in terms of the narrative we're seeing in the press. Productivity gains have also gone through the roof because that's not necessarily a good thing in terms of the amount of meetings that we're having. But it's that flip. It's back to what you and I talk until the cows come home, Simon. It's the people bit, and the lawyer understanding at a personal level, much like the CRM system, much like social. What's in it for me, selfishly, getting to the egos? If I do this, this, and this, now I understand it's not the marketing team, Marcon's team, asking me just to push the corporate message. I selfishly see what this can do for me. Now that kind of makes sense, and most of the time it's been unlocking that kind of barrier in their heads of what social media is today versus maybe what their preconceptions were of it five years ago. Not everyone is going to come on that journey. Not everyone will, and nor should they.
Yeah.
But it's identifying those. It's what Tim Williams from Analytica talks about. I did a podcast with him last year on this. Finding the anomaly influencers within your organization, kind of the individuals who are kind of already doing this. They don't necessarily have to be a partner. If I think back to, he's now a partner at K&E, a chap called Daniel Lim, IP associate A&O.
Yeah.
Brilliant on Twitter.
Yeah.
And the firm were like, cool then. He was getting picked up to, interviews by journals and all this kind of stuff because A&O were like, yeah, cool, go for it. You do. We don't care that you're an associate doing that. If that's generating business conversation, getting you in the press and the A&O brand out there, all for it. So yeah, that's kind of my take on it. It's that shift in terms of the partner perception, dare I say it, who are normally of an age profile, and what they see is like stuff in the Daily Mail or what their kids are doing, and they can't make that translation into how I can get this to work for me at a business level.
Yeah, in my last year at Burgess Salmon, I said to partnership, look, I understand that some of you don't want to do this, and that's absolutely fine, but please can we have a vote that you won't get in the way of the youngsters who do want to do it and crack on with this as well. And there's a very funny incident I tweeted about a while ago. I don't know if you picked up on it at the time, but do you remember the lawyer ran that World Cup of law firms, which went brilliantly well for them? Yeah. And just coming into the final, I think it was Bird and Bird versus either A&O or CC. It was, huge kind of playoff, as it were. And I just thought, well, A&O got this sealed up. Yeah, absolutely, it's not a problem at all. Just because you and I had seen other votes go through and the things that we did on the watch along and things like that as well, right? And somebody somewhere had the sense to go down and have a chat with this guy and say, can you do something about this? Anyway, 700 votes in like a matter of minutes. And I looked into it and found out who it was. There's a guy who worked in their post room, right? But he had this huge influential following on Instagram and other areas. But I love the idea that somebody knew somewhere to go, right, I've got to go and ask the influencer that works currently in the post room to go and do this. I don't know if he was a male model or something as well, right? But it seemed to work, whatever he did. And hundreds of votes later, they won the day, as it were. So very clever. But actually, what was interesting was then when they moved it into the barristers' world, the barristers were just voracious in pursuing kind of like winning this stuff in a way that I think there is something about barristers' use of Twitter, but they went all out for it. Chambers were sending out pictures of cats. their email marketing campaigns to try and kind of win this World Cup of Chambers as well. And I'm still surprised, I said it a few days ago as well, that Chambers aren't using more of LinkedIn. Even as individual barristers, they're not using it anywhere near the way that they are other platforms. So, it's interesting because I think the level of maturity within social media use, and I'm using that as a proxy for CRM use, right?
Yeah.
Is still, I would say, is still at the foothills of where we've got to go to. I think we've got a long way to go yet.
It absolutely is. I mean, you just plug into Sales Navigator, any firm, I can just go, right, only 20% of your employee base. It's typically the rule of thumb, I don't know what it is, it seems to be around 20% of any firm number is those who are doing stuff on social, on LinkedIn, and then it's analysing is it even kind of the right thing that they're doing. And it's just thinking about the simple way to think about social is look at every single employee that you have on LinkedIn, whatever that number is. Now imagine, to your point, Simon, about that chap in the IT department, someone knows someone somewhere. So if each employee could generate one referral opportunity through social worth X thousands of pounds in terms of matter revenue, think about what that extra pipeline could generate. Just one referral meeting over a 12-month period through your LinkedIn networks. And I go back to my JLL days. I used to have arguments with the surveyors, so I was blue in the face, going, yeah, but they're not connected to the head of property. They're connected to the head of marketing. Okay, but they know the head of marketing really, really well. The chances are the head of marketing probably knows who the head of property is. So why don't we start the conversation with the head of marketing and go and talk to the head of property? Likewise, if it's not the general counsel, but someone has a really good relationship with the head of IT, or someone has a really good relationship with someone in the finance department, okay, let's start that conversation there, and then see how we can start to network our way through. And if we think about, again, back to the behaviors, I think to a tech consulting firm I did a project with, this idea of being connected. And some of the partners are saying, I've never thought about my social connections in this way because I felt I was connected to my client because I've got their telephone number in my phone, I've got their email address saved in my address book, therefore I felt connected. I hadn't considered that by not connecting on a social network, so let's say LinkedIn, the impact that's going to have in terms of they had Sales Navigator and we're rolling out the latest version of Dynamics. So the impact that has in terms of CRM, but B, by not being connected, when I then do things on LinkedIn or social, now I understand what's happening. They're never going to see what I'm doing. Therefore, that I'm not going to remain front of mind. So now I understand why you need to be connected to people that you do know to help kind of maintain that, and especially if you're looking to bring social data into your CRM systems. Any organization is only as good as the network it's building online. And if we think about attorneys or partners, especially if they've been in the game 10, 15 years, they probably met some pretty influential business people through their careers who may well have moved on to different roles, but they have no idea that person's now there because they weren't connected to them on social. And that then comes back to, I was just reading an article again from another Forrester analyst talking about how B2B sales now needs to think about Moneyball. So Moneyball, the baseball film with Brad Pitt, how they were using data to kibosh some of the assumptions on who the players are in terms of their strike rate hits and home runs and stuff. Again, back to where we are today, if you were to start from scratch, I mean, if you really want us to have your mind blown, there's a new CRM tool on the block called C3.ai, which is Microsoft Dynamics, their own AI engine, and Adobe Marketplace, all bashed into one, to the point where you can now type in, I want to sell or market to the financial services sector, and they will pre-populate your CRM for you with the companies and organizations and the ideal customer profile that you should be talking to. I've got a call this evening with a tech company called White Rabbit Intel, again, where they can help you understand who are the right people you should be marketing to versus the wrong people. Jeremy.
Gents, hello, sorry. Here I am. Can you see me okay? So I'm doing it all wrong. You've got bad lighting and I've turned up late to ask a question.
Up for it with the brightness of the t-shirt, Jez. So
it's got lots of stains on it as well. Anyway, let's not go there. Oh, forgive me. What have I done? You're still there, guys? Yeah,
we can still hear you.
Right. Let's get to the question. I've got a question. I'm going to ask you. You guys have given us a load of useful insight anyway, but I'm going to ask for one more thing. And I'll tell you what I'm asking for, and I'll explain a bit of context. I'm after metrics. I'm after one or two important metrics, smart metrics that I may not already be using or looking at. And what I've really got in mind is Alex, you gave that great example earlier of somebody winning an opportunity to pitch for $1 million, but it's nothing. So my sort of question is around how the different elements of marketing and CRM, what their objectives are. Because, for example, the online campaign won't win that $1 million pitch, but it will win the opportunity, and it should be rewarded for creating that opportunity, not the revenue, because it's done its job. It's somebody else's job to win that pitch. I'm just wondering, with sort of that sort of causation in mind, whether either of you can come up with any sort of metrics that might be slightly a little bit left field, but really genuinely indicate how well a certain element of the CRM effort is doing.
Well, I can go on that one. And I don't think CMOs would like this response, but then CMOs now need to start carrying a number. They need to start carrying a revenue target. And we're starting to see this come. I'm actually doing a podcast, I think at some point this week, with a chap from, my brain's gone numb, Cognizant, who one of these third-party data providers, because he wrote a blog how his team were able to prove $820,000 worth of revenue from marketing content. And the initial calls I've had is that they sit and they have the conversations with the sales teams. So they work with the sales teams and go, right, sales teams. So think lawyer in this construct. You're on the coalface. You're talking to customers on a daily basis. What are the problems they're facing? What are you hearing? What are the challenges that our clients and prospects are telling us? How can then we, as the content marketing team or the marketing team, turn that into a story? And then it's around sophistication of your marketing capabilities. So it's things like having each employee having a unique, is it UTM code, Simon?
Yeah.
So you can now start to attribute that person's post. So Jeremy shared that from his profile and that generated X in terms of conversation or inbound or sign-ups, which then gets put into a CRM system, which then gets followed up. And I've got to call it one, Simon, but now we're moving into the world of sales engagement platforms. So this is then, I don't think law firms are anywhere near this, but then this is things like SalesLoft, Outreach, Gong, and this is automation to start to track that. But the challenge is that in our world, it's very hard to prove that online thing that we did actually generates, especially with lawyers, because they're like, no, it's all me, the ego, because I'm so wonderfully brilliant. That's my take on it.
I think there are, so I used to run surveys, as you know, for legal business, and I think that one of the things I learned from that is there are proxy scores, Jez, that work quite well throughout the process, right? So in the comms phase, there's going to be a score, there needs to be a number on the board, and that's, to do with impressions, right, or reads or views or whatever it might be. So let's record those accurately. Then we're gonna have a split between the kind of stuff that is a need as an individual, or it's by role. So if you need a will, then we've got to split you off down a certain route, and we're going to record the activities by, what the click-through rate is. And most of that stuff on the need side of things can be done digitally, and you and I can take that conversation offline. You can actually map that relatively easy. The role-based stuff is a bit hard there because it's fundamentally going to be phone this partner, isn't it, or come to our event. But we've got systems in place that track each of those kind of metrics through. And I think joining up 3 or 4, 5 proxy metrics, how many impressions did you get, how many click-throughs did you get, how many event signups did you get, how many, whatever it might be, you should have a funnel that sits there, and they will look different for different practice areas. In wills, it will look different to real estate development, but knowing what normal, as it were, looks like, I think it's a really good starting place for each of those things. So I would just map out how it might go to win that journey, to win those clients, as it were, and I think you'll you'll find some good answers in there. But I'm happy to pick it up with you offline, because there are some things I'm doing with another friend at the moment. I'm mapping exactly that in Data Studio for different digital people.
That then it comes back to the syncing of marketing to sales data to CRM data. Yeah. So if somebody turned up to an online event, gave you their email address, that email address was put into a CRM system, that was then followed up, and that turned into something. And historically, there was zero relationship with that client beforehand. And Jeremy, you can absolutely attribute that if we hadn't done that, that person may not have turned up. Therefore, that is attributed to that. That's why I get, people say, prove to me social selling works. And I said, all social selling is just digital lead generation. Once that conversation has started and recorded in a CRM system, this was originated because of a social post, because of an online piece of activity. If the LOI can't convert, and I agree with you 100% on this, Jeremy, social marketing hasn't failed. It's done its job in terms of generating that opportunity. The BD process, or let's call it what it is, the sales process has failed. But then we come into, if it has failed, who's following up with it? Who's going to that client? Why did we lose? What could we done better? And really starting to interrogate that. And we typically know if they do happen, they get swept under the carpet anyway. Nobody bothers iterating and learning from what's gone wrong and doing things a little bit differently, because you always come close second on price, which we know is BS, unless their price is so outlandish and they stay with the incumbent. We then know you just used to beat up the incumbent on price. Maybe a whole separate session, Simon.
I think we should do that. Listen, we're going to have to leave it there for today. I'm just mindful of your call. Alex, thank you so much for that. And
absolute pleasure.
Camera as well, and catching up with us as well. We should catch up offline. Listen, for those of you who haven't signed up to the BD Roundtable, please do so. And we'll see you soon for the next session. Alex, thanks again from me.
Thanks, everyone.
Who attended. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alex.
Bye, all right. Thanks.
Bye.